On this episode of the Road to the Mr. Olympia series, we have what I believe could be one of the most surprising matchups at this event. Currently, all the hype around who will win the Olympia surrounds 4 guys. You of course have the past 3 winners of the Olympia, Samson, Derek, and Hadi, and then Nick Walker. Those are the 4 guys everyone seems to be hedging their bets on to win the title this year. However, I don't think that means those are the only 4 guys that can win the Olympia this year. I think there's at least one more guy that can actually take the title if he's on. That guy is Andrew Jacked. I really believe that if he can make the very minor improvements that he needs and puts it all together, he can beat everyone. In fact, a 100% Andrew Jacked would have a far easier time than most at winning a Sandow, but I want to fact check that claim. To do so, I'm going to compare him to Derek Lunsford, who is technically the favorite on paper. Bringing his best package to date, he was able to beat Samson Dauda, the current Mr. Olympia at the 2025 Arnold Classic, so he'll be using that same Mr. Olympia beating physique in this matchup. For Andrew, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to let him use his best shots regardless of what show it's from. If his rear double was the best at one of the Olympias, but the front double was the best at this year's Arnold, we won't make him stick to one version. I'll allow him to use either version for either pose. He's allowed to use any version for any pose in this matchup. Is this cheating? Well, no, but I get that it's not fair. I'm not trying to pretend it is, but I am trying to prove a point. Andrew just needs to pull it all together. He just needs to take the pieces from all his best versions, former versions that he's already brought, mind you, and he needs to combine them into one ultimate version in order to potentially be Mr. Olympia. Anyway, the stage is set, so let's go ahead and jump into another episode of my Road to the Mr. Olympia series. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Honestly, on most of these poses, there just isn't a whole lot to say. In the majority of these poses, either of these guys are either the best in the world or close to it, while their opponent is pretty weak. Here in the front double, while I certainly wouldn't say Derek is weak by any means, I do happen to think Andrew Jacked is the best in the world currently. But honestly, even though Derek is quite good in this pose, I still think we have a good amount of distance here, at least to my eye. For one, Andrew towers over Derek, and sure, height doesn't directly affect anything, but when you're Andrew and bring a great level of development for this shot at least, on top of great lines and detail, extra height can only help. I will say, although Andrew's shape isn't as cartoony as Derek's, I don't know if I'd call it worse. Andrew's long limbs and tall frame actually work here, but the head-on angle isn't as flattering. I wish he would add a little tilt to this pose or just something to make his waist look even smaller. In terms of the actual V-taper, Derek is better, but I know plenty of you out there will still prefer Andrew's shape to Derek's. But what's really surprising here is the different muscle groups, because I don't know if I'd give anything to Derek. I guess he might win the legs, but that's really a stretch, and then the upper body stuff doesn't even need a discussion. Andrew's lats from the front are a lot wider and thicker, his chest pops more, it's a lot harder and more separated, and the arms aren't even close. Even for overall condition, I prefer Andrew. Andrew's condition as a whole has some weak areas, but absolutely none of them are in the front shots. Derek, on the other hand, has his trademark characteristic of soft and smooth arms, pecs, and even lats here. Now, with all that said, as I said at the top of this pose, I think there's a pretty large divide here for these poses, despite both of them being within the top 5 of the current crop of guys. Andrew is just that good. He's a lot bigger than brother Derek. He's more conditioned and has great shape too, if not the better shape. Personally, I'd give 3 points to Andrew over the midget, but I get that I have an anti-Derek bias, so I'll be conservative here. We're still using the same 2, 3, 4 point system as always, and while I do think Andrew is better than Derek by enough to make it 3 points, I think perhaps the more objective choice would just be 2. Both of these guys have top 5 poses, like I said, so it really doesn't feel right to give Andrew 3 points over someone who could honestly be runner-up to him right now, depending on who you ask. But if you were to ask me on my own, I'd be a bit more harsh. In the front lat spread, I have even less to say. Andrew, once again, is the best in the world for this one, but now Derek is actually one of the worst on the Olympia stage. It's really weird because on paper he has all the tools for a good shot, but it does not come together. His only highlight is once again the legs, but it's arguable if he even wins there, and then up top, Andrew is substantially better than him in everything, from ab detail to arm and delt roundness to the lats. Really, the only reason this is not 4 points is because of the toss up the legs, and I guess he doesn't look that bad, but definitely well below average. I think he just looks worse to me because I see him as a Mr. Olympia and Arnold Classic champion, and to me, if you have those titles, you shouldn't have poses like these. But if he wasn't a title winner, I don't think I'd care as much. But with those titles comes an extra level of criticism, so maybe I am justified in my harshness towards Derek and justified in a 4-point win for Andrew here. But I'd rather be conservative. We could have debated a 3-pointer for Andrew in the last pose, but here it's pretty objective. Now, the last time I compared Andrew to anyone, it was Nick Walker, and I made a crazy statement in that video by giving the side chest pose to Andrew. Well, I stand by that. I'll say it's closer here too. I am prepared to give it to Andrew once again. The main thing that always screws Andrew over is not his lack of density or hamstrings, it's really his posing. He has these really long limbs, so often he just looks lanky and awkward in this pose. But at the Arnold, he hit this pose pretty well. It still looks hella awkward, but for him, I don't think it can get much better than this. And what we have here is decent enough to let his great quality shine through. Andrew has a ton of really 3D and surprisingly detailed muscle in this shot. In the arm and delt, I have to go with Andrew for sure, and in the abs too, of course. And honestly, maybe even the pecs, although this is pretty contentious. In the far pec, I actually prefer Derek just a little because he looks fuller and has okay detail there, but with both pecs combined for the overall look of the chest, I prefer Andrew, if that makes any sense. And let's not forget Andrew's important wins in overall size and width up top. But downstairs, we get a different story. Andrew's not what I'd call outright weak anymore down here, but he's on the weaker side. But again, I think the main thing that trips him up is posing. The leg should be completely parallel with the judges' table. Instead, he has his knee tilted towards the audience. Contrast this with Derek, whose side leg is completely flat against his other leg, and completely parallel to the point of view of the audience. Yes, Andrew does need more real mass on his hamstrings, both from the side and rear, but it would help him a lot by just actually presenting what he has more favorably. As it is now, he clearly has a lot of size, both in the quad and hamstring, but he just needs to lock that posing in and still make some minor improvements. The size is mostly there, so is the separation, but Derek is still better. He has a fantastic side leg, so he puts some distance between himself and Andrew down here. Overall, a call in this pose is probably a lot closer than you guys might have thought. Andrew has a great level of overall size in the upper half and a lot of detail, but falters a bit in the side leg. However, I like the fact that Derek is more balanced and complete top to bottom, and to contrast Andrew's sloppier posing, Derek hits this shot perfectly. I will put Derek ahead here, but just barely. But let's examine the bigger picture for a moment. This is or was one of Andrew's weak links. The side poses, especially this one, were his second main foil to his placings along with back poses. But while he does lose this shot, that doesn't mean he shoots himself in the foot here. This really does fill in one of his major gaps across the 8 mandatory shots. Sure, it might not beat everyone, but I don't think a lot of people realize just how many people he can beat with this pose as it is right here. Off of sheer size and structure alone, he can stand next to just about anyone, and he has great muscle bellies for the shot and terrific details on top of that. If he can make those minor improvements that we talked about and lock in the posing just a little bit more, he'll beat just about everyone in this shot, including Derek. In the rear double, we're back to having not really much to comment on. But now it's flipped and Derek easily wins. But honestly, I think this 2024 version of Andrew I put up here actually deserves a little more credit than he probably will get. For one, his best strength is going to be the fact that regardless of the version we use, he's going to make Derek look pretty small. However, overall size is not Andrew's main weakness, it's the lack of depth and quality, usually. Here at the 2024 Mr. Olympia, he was at his best in terms of those things. The upper back actually looks pretty good, there's a lot of detail there and a good amount of depth there. He actually wins the arms and delts for what it's worth, and he's actually bigger in the lower half. His only pitfall is that he's not in condition, and Derek has the most shredded glutes and hams in this modern era. I'm going to go ahead and give Derek the full 4 points, but to be honest, I don't know if that's right. Don't get me wrong, Andrew is pretty soundly beat in terms of development and detail top to bottom, but the back is decent here, enough that I might actually want to show some mercy to Andrew. But really, the choice is still pretty obvious. Derek has one of the best rear doubles of all time, not just in this current era, and Andrew's not even top 20. I don't like a lot of things on Derek, but this probably still does warrant a 4-point victory. Now, usually Derek wins back-to-back poses when we turn these guys around, but typically his win in the lat spread is a little more narrow. And that's just because he's more narrow, to be honest. He's just on the smaller side. He does have a great structure, but at the end of the day, he's like 5'4". He's great in the rear double because the lack of width isn't as detrimental as it is here, but in this pose, it is the main criteria. Andrew is just clearly wider. I think every one of the top guys is wider than Derek, though. However, I don't know if Derek's better quality in the back is enough for a win this time. Yeah, that back is thick, but not really that detailed. I don't like how it all blurs together and looks puffy. Legitimately, Andrew is better on the detail side of things this time around. He has less fullness, but more separation between these different areas. What ultimately secures Derek's sweep of the 2 back poses, though, is his edge in the lower body. And I'm not talking about the one he gives to the judges. Andrew could be so good as is with just a little better conditioning. Yes, extra back thickness, a little more hamstring development would help. But really, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say he would win if he was just in better shape. Honestly, Andrew right now is so wide in the back compared to Derek and has so much size in the lower half that he doesn't really even need that much more detail to win. Some guys just don't need to be as shredded as others to win poses and shows, like Samson Dowda for example. Andrew is pretty much in the same boat. If these guys just show up in good enough condition, they beat everyone. And if they showed up peeled, it's lights out. With that said, for this shot, I would say Andrew only needs to be 5 to 10% better condition-wise to beat Derek. And if he did fill in his posterior chain a bit more, I think it would actually start moving the needle in the other direction quite quickly, maybe even to a 3-point win for Andrew. Who knows? Right now, Derek does win, but if I'm saying Andrew could win with just a hair more detail, I think that shows us that this isn't a dominant win at all. The main thing I want in this pose is width, and I get a lot more of it from Andrew. I even get more detail in the back. So yeah, it is close. But for right now, Derek does just enough in the lower body and with the condition to win by 2 points. Now the side tricep is a pretty tricky one. Derek really excels in his presentation, making him look better than he is. Andrew makes himself look worse than he has to. Still though, Andrew does win almost everything. The abs are a no-brainer compared to Derek's washed out stomach, same with the pecs. Andrew also takes the arm, including the delt and yes, the tricep. The only thing Derek does win is the side leg, but he does take that pretty convincingly. So yeah, all in all, it's a pretty precarious situation we find ourselves in. I didn't expect Andrew to win. Luckily for this pose, we can get some clarification. I was using both of their 2025 Arnold Classic versions anyway for this shot, so we can just take a look at the call-out photo to see what really went down. Based on the previous pick, I was definitely ready to hand the win over to Andrew. However, watching him in motion and capturing this screenshot, I have to say he looks worse than the previous photo. On this real stage, the side leg looks a little closer, but Andrew still takes a lot of the upper body wins. But overall, Derek just looks so much more poised. And there's just no excuse for bad posing. Yeah, Andrew may technically have more substance to his shot, winning all these different body parts, but if you can't show that and hold it together, then those wins don't matter. And yeah, based on this real lineup photo, although it is close, I'm going to give the edge to Derek. This is extremely frustrating though, because Andrew could most definitely win if he just did the bare minimum. It would be a smaller win, but he has so much going for him that all he needs to do is not pose like an idiot. So I am giving Derek a small win today, but we'll see how long it continues to be like this. I don't know if this will be expected or not, but Andrew clears Derek in our final pose. Look, historically, Andrew has really struggled with this pose, mainly just because he couldn't find a good variation to hit. But here at the 2025 Arnold, he finally found it. I think this is honestly as good as it's going to get for him. He's going to look lanky in a lot of variations like he does in the side chest, so his take on the crab pose here where he can hide the extra limb length gets rid of his one hang-up. Let's not forget that the most muscular at its core is a front shot. And from the front, Andrew is probably the best bodybuilder right now. And next to Andrew, low def Derek doesn't look good at all. He's compact, he looks muscular, sure. I'd even throw the legs in there for him, but that's it. The chest, delts, and arms are all made out of silly putty. Andrew wins all of those things on both size and detail, and overall he towers over Derek once again. Even in Derek's one win, the quads, Andrew looks pretty freaking good. I was going to include another call out photo like I did in the side tricep, but I don't even think it's close enough to warrant that. Derek is a marshmallow like I said, and when Andrew uses a good variation, it just becomes another front pose to him. And Derek lost all of the other front shot, so it's not hard to see how it happens here. In fact, I think the gap is large enough here for 3 points. Besides the legs, Derek doesn't win anything and looks quite poor in my opinion. Andrew, on the other hand, really impresses me from both a size and detail perspective. Again, this may be surprising, but I really don't see how I could be wrong here. We could maybe argue about the margin on this pose, but then you'd have to be defending Derek, which I don't even know how you'd go about doing for this shot. Next, we have the second round of judging, which includes the 4 overall physique categories: muscularity, condition, shape, and flaws. Let's start with the most obvious one being condition. This is always a bigger loss for Andrew, but with Derek, it's not as bad. Derek has great spots for his condition like the hams and glutes, but also really soft spots like the chest, delts, and arms. Coincidentally, these are areas where Andrew kills it. He wins from the front in terms of condition, and from the side, he's just as good if not a little better, at least in the upper half, but he does get killed from behind. Overall, I think when you go shot for shot with both guys' peaks and valleys, it's not the biggest loss for Andrew, but I think it's still just enough to give Derek 3 points. Next, in terms of shape, I have it as a tie. Derek has the better shape in the front double, he has a great V-taper when he hits a vacuum, but without it, I don't think Derek's shape is actually that good. Now, Andrew's shape is perhaps not as exaggerated as Derek's, but at the same time, it's still a very pleasing look with the small waist, and I think the longer limbs help too. I'll make it a tie because I don't like to split hairs in the most subjective category, but if anything, I actually lean towards Andrew here. He doesn't need a vacuum to have good shape. And I know plenty plenty of people out there will back me up on this. Next, you guys can call me crazy, but I have muscularity as a tie as well. Some shorter guys like Martin or Hadi still lose overall size to Andrew, but win off of their completeness. I don't think Derek can do that. In terms of per inch muscle, I guess he still gets a small win, but overall he looks pretty small next to Andrew. I mean, he looks small next to those shorter guys I mentioned even. So to me, Derek is just too underwhelming. And really, besides the back, what body parts does Derek consistently win? Lats, delts, arms, those all go to Andrew. Chest, Derek probably doesn't win that either. The quads are iffy too. He technically did win the glutes and hams, but that was off of condition and detail. Andrew was actually bigger. And then again, in terms of the overall comparison size-wise between these two guys, Derek looks like he goes home to Snow White after the judges hand him a win. I'm definitely not ready to give Andrew this category. He still lacks too much, but he's still a lot bigger than Derek, and when you go body part for body part, it really just shows how incomplete Derek is, let alone Andrew. So a tie is what these guys will have to settle for. And finally, we have the flaws category. Derek's sogginess upstairs is pretty much the only thing I want to hit him on for this version, and that's already been accounted for in the condition category. So the only thing I really need to dock someone for here at this point is Andrew's posing. Even when using his best poses with different versions, he straight up looks mentally handicapped in a few shots. And there's just no excuse for it. There isn't a reason out there that a top 5 bodybuilder can't hit poses correctly. So Andrew takes a small loss here to complete the second round of judging. Alright, now it's time to reveal the final scores and conclude this matchup. Winning this comparison with 56.2 points was Derek Lunsford, leaving Andrew Jack with 43.8 points. Now you'll remember my whole point for doing this video was to show how Andrew can win the Mr. Olympia. Well, I get that he didn't technically win this matchup, but to me, this is all the proof I need. I get that some of you will say that I used Andrew's best poses from his best versions for each shot and he still couldn't beat Derek, and sure, there is some truth in that. But it would be a little different if I was doing one of those Photoshop vids or speculating on what Andrew could bring. These are all previous versions of Andrew. There's no reason he can't replicate the good things about them and combine them. A lot of the differences in Andrew's versions just come from posing and peaking differences. You can literally change those things in a week. Really locking in on those poses and getting the best peak is half the battle. The truth is, he really doesn't need to actually improve all that much. He still needs a little improvements to his posterior chain and some slightly better condition. And really, all those things kind of help each other, so he doesn't really need much. If he had a more developed back, he wouldn't need to be as conditioned probably, and if Andrew's more shredded, he probably wouldn't need much more in terms of glutes and hams from the rear. He's a genetic anomaly. He's crazy tall with terrific shape and is pretty filled out. He's not that far behind Samson. And like Samson, he doesn't need to be the most filled out or the most shredded. He just needs to do enough to coast on the other great things that he has going for him. So Andrew doesn't need to do much, and even right now, as is, I see him and Derek as in the same boat. They have high highs and low lows to their physiques, even with their best versions. Andrew's front shots are crazy, while Derek's pretty weak outside of his front double. The abs and thighs and front lat spread are not good shots at all. But on the flip side, Andrew has a weaker back and Derek's back poses are great. And then these guys are actually pretty close from the side now. Derek did win both poses, but I could have flipped either of them. With these guys trading blows in the mandatories, we were left with some pretty big swings in the first round of judging. But I do think as of right now, Derek is just barely the better bodybuilder, but that's a stretch. However, I think this claim does hold some weight because he was able to win the overall physique categories round. However, when you look at the scores, it was really just because of condition. Now, I have no problem with that being the deciding factor here. In fact, I think condition is the best way to decide a close matchup, but that's the only way Derek was able to hold on. Again, Andrew does not need to do that much to beat this version of Derek if Andrew can just pull it all together at the same time. If Andrew could just get a little more crisp in the back or hit those side poses better or maybe fill them in a bit more or fill in the most muscular or even the back poses a bit more. Any one of those small changes with keeping his posing and peak intact would result in a small victory over Derek. Or hey, maybe he doesn't need to do anything. Maybe Derek will slip up. I can tell you right now, if Derek brings that soft, puffy, and small Pittsburgh Pro version, Andrew wins. So again, some of you will say, even with Andrew's most ideal scenario, he couldn't beat this version of Derek. Well, look at it this way. Derek, with his best version yet, can barely hold Andrew off. If Andrew makes one small change, even against this version of Derek, Andrew would win. He's just far too superior in terms of those raw genetic factors. And if I have to put up with some notable flaws with either physique, I'd honestly rather take Andrew over Derek, as I prefer Andrew's strengths to Derek's. And I think Derek's weak points are honestly more glaring. However, this is if Andrew can make some small adjustments. Right now, both of these guys have great things about them and awful things too. But the deciding factor factor for me today is Derek's condition. I think we can argue about whose flaws are worse and whose strengths are better, but I think we'll get in the weeds on that one, and I already gave you my personal opinion anyway. I think right now Derek is just the slightly better bodybuilder. I'm a conditioning stickler, and if I hate on Samson so much for having poor condition, I'm going to keep the same energy for Andrew. But with all that said, I think my point has been made. It would not take Andrew much at all to beat the best version of Derek, and Derek in a lot of people's eyes might be the one to win the Olympia this year. The judges clearly like him more than Nick. Samson might not be able to bring the condition, and Hadi is only getting older. Derek, on paper, I hate to say it, has a good chance to win the Olympia. Honestly though, if we're giving Samson the Olympia title for just being good enough condition-wise while he has other things going for him, I don't think it'd be wrong at all to have this ultimate version of Andrew beating Derek as it is right now. If Samson and Derek get away with some things, why can't Andrew? But we'll see if Andrew can even bring something like this. He's yet to put it all together, especially at the Olympia. I might have Derek winning right now, but barely, by the skin of his teeth. And if Andrew could put it all together, I don't think it's just Derek that's on the chopping block. I think a 100% Andrew might even be more dangerous than a 100% Samson Dauda. But we'll see if Andrew can put it all together. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. If Andrew could put it all together like in this video, just using old versions, could that be Derek's 2025 Arnold Classic version? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you guys like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. And if you guys want to get your hands on some high quality supplements while supporting my channel even further, head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, be sure to use my code PROJECT10 to get 10% off your entire order. That's code PROJECT10 on armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.